If they catch us, they'll hang me twice. That's what she whispered to the lonely rancher who gave her shelter. Bride at the border, Texas, Mexico borderlands, 1887. The storm came in fast, a howling wind that bent the mesquites sideways and flung dust into the blackened. Sky thunder cracked so loud it rattled the windows of the ranch house. And the rain fell not in drops, but in sheets, pounding the earth like a war drum. Colt Mercer stood alone in his kitchen, the fire low behind him. A half-drunk mug of coffee, going cold on the table. He had heard it, a noise he wasn't supposed to hear out here. Not this late, not in this storm. Sound just beyond the southern fence line, something between a whimper and a broken sob. He grabbed the rifle from its place by the door, old but kept clean. He didn't bother with a coat, only pulled on his hat, stepped into his boots, and walked out into the storm like it owed him answers. The rain soaked him in seconds. He moved fast through the mud, boots sinking with every step, until he reached the edge of the property where the barbed wire met the world. That's when he saw her. She was collapsed near the fence post, one arm curled under her, the other clutching her side. Her dress, what remained of it, clung to her like wet paper. Blood seeped between her fingers. Mud covered her knees, her hair, her face, and still her eyes burned through the dark. Colt raised, his rifle out of instinct. She didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her chin with a fragile defiance. Her lips parted, and the words came out like gravel. If they catch us, they'll hang me twice. Colt's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing, under the brim of his hat. Lucky for you, he said, voice steady despite the thunder. There ain't no law out here tonight. She swayed, then collapsed completely. He didn't hesitate. Colt dropped to one knee, slung the rifle over his shoulder, and lifted her up like she weighed. No more than memory. She was freezing, skin like snow melt, breath shallow and rapid. Her pulse beat fast against his chest as he carried her through the storm. Inside the ranch house, the warmth hit like a wall. Colt laid her gently on the sofa near the hearth, water dripping from both of them onto the floorboards. The fire crackled weakly. He stoked it with practiced hands until the room glowed with gold. He looked at her again, young, maybe 20 at most. Skin the color of desert clay, cheekbones sharp, lips bruised from biting them in pain. A long gash ran across her side, soaked in blood and rain. Colt set to work in silence. First he knelt and unlaced her soaked, mud-crusted shoes. He placed them near the fire to dry. Then he reached for the thick wool blanket folded over the rocking chair, the one that had once belonged to Maria. He hesitated only a second before wrapping it gently around the girl. She stirred. He knelt. Again, this time closer, checking her wound. The cut was deep but clean. Blade, not bullet. Fresh. He'd seen enough to know it had happened hours ago. She opened her eyes. They darted around the room, panic flickering. You're safe, Colt said quietly. Ain't nobody gonna find you here tonight. Her lips trembled. You shouldn't have brought me inside. I reckon you'd be dead otherwise. She closed her eyes again, too tired to argue. Colt stood, poured hot water into a basin, and began tearing strips of clean cloth from an old shirt. His movements were steady, careful, quiet. As he worked, the storm outside began to ease. The worst of it had passed. But something told Colt the real trouble had just begun. He looked at her one more time before turning down the lantern. Who the hell are you? He thought. And what storm did you bring with you? The storm had died down, but inside the cabin a different kind of storm lingered. The fire burned low, casting soft shadows across the wooden walls. Colt Mercer sat in the rocking chair, one hand resting on the rifle beside him. Though his gaze never strayed far from the girl on the sofa, she was still fevered, her breath shallow, her sleep restless. Then suddenly a cry. No, let her go. Please, she's just a child. Colt was on his feet in an instant. He rushed to her side just as her arms thrashed, legs kicking against invisible hands. Hey, you're all right. It's just a dream. Her eyes snapped open. She gasped, chest heaving, and shoved him hard away. Don't touch me, she cried out, voice cracking. Then just like that, the fight vanished from her body. She folded in on herself, trembling, her hands clutching the wool blanket like it might hold her together. Colt knelt beside her again, slower, this time. Careful. He didn't reach for her. Instead, he spoke softly. You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you. Her eyes flicked to him, weary, uncertain, then to the fire. She stayed quiet for a long time, then finally a whisper. Ah, she was my. Sister Colt didn't ask. She went on, words tumbling now, like a wound breaking open. We were just trying to cross. I told her we'd be safe. I told her. She choked back a sob. But they caught us, took us to a holding camp near Presidio, said they'd send us back, but they didn't. She paused, tears burning down, her cheeks. He was in charge. The officer said we'd learn respect, but he only taught her pain. Her hands clenched the blanket tighter. He tied her up, starved her. Then one night, I heard her scream. I got to her too late. She couldn't finish. Colt looked away, jaw tight. Isabella swallowed hard, voice like splintered glass. After they buried her, he kept walking like nothing happened. I followed him for 3 nights. Didn't want to kill him. I only wanted to make him look me in the eye. She looked at Colt now, pleading. But he wouldn't. He laughed, said she screamed like an animal. I snapped. We fought. I tried to grab his gun to stop him from pulling at first. It went off. A tear rolled down her chin. I didn't mean to, but now they say I'm a murderer. Silence, stretched thick between them. Then she whispered, They'll hang me once for the officer, and again for crossing the border into a white man's home. Colt studied her. Her face was gaunt, skin bruised and pale, but there was nothing hollow in her eyes, only grief and something else. The fragile remains of a soul trying not to rot in hatred. He didn't ask anything else. He just said, Sometimes you don't need to talk. His voice was calm but firm. Out here, silence don't mean guilt. It means you've lived through hell and lived anyway. Isabella blinked at him, stunned by the lack of judgment. No suspicion, no threats, just quiet understanding. She nodded barely and lay back against the cushion. Her hands loosened their grip, her breathing steadied. Colt stood, added a log to the fire, and dimmed the lantern until the room softened in amber glow. As he passed her, on his way back to the chair, he paused and gently pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders, the same one Maria once wrapped around him the night her father died. Isabella whispered before her eyes closed again. Thank you for not asking. Colt didn't answer. He just sat back in the chair, staring at the fire, and listened to the sound of one more broken soul, learning how to sleep. Morning broke slow and gray over the Mercer Ranch, with clouds still hanging, heavy from the storm's remains. The land was quiet, but tension settled like smoke over the house. Colt had been outside feeding the horses when he saw the dust cloud on the horizon. Riders, 4 of them, border patrol. He didn't curse, didn't panic, just walked back to the cabin, opened the door, and said quietly, Isabella, you need to stay calm. She looked up from the hearth, face still pale, hair loose over her shoulders. What's wrong? Company. You'll know who. She stiffened. Before she could speak again, boots thudded outside. Colt opened the door before they could knock. The first man through was lean with slicked back hair and a badge that gleamed too bright for the day. His name was Garrett Lyle, a man Colt had known distantly during his Army days. Now he wore the weight of the law like a blade. "Morning, Mercer," Lyle said, voice casual but tight. "Got reports of a fugitive seen near your land. Woman, Mexican, dangerous." Colt leaned one shoulder against the doorframe, calm as ever. "Don't get many visitors here. Rain tends to keep trouble. Out." Lyle motioned to the others who began dismounting and spreading around. "Mind if we look around? These days can't be too careful." Colt's jaw flexed. He stepped back, holding the door open. "Help yourself. Coffee's old, but the air's clean." Lyle nodded and walked inside, eyes scanning every corner. His gaze landed on Isabella, who stood near the hearth, wrapped in the wool blanket. She froze but didn't run. Lyle's eyes narrowed. "Who's this?" Colt didn't blink, walked straight to her, and took her hand. "My wife." The room went quiet. Lyle arched a brow. "Funny. Didn't know you remarried." "Didn't announce it. Got no one left to announce to." Lyle stepped closer, eyes boring into Isabella's face. She kept her chin up, though Colt could feel the tremble in her hand. "What's your name, ma'am?" She swallowed. Colt answered for her. "Isabella Mercer. Got papers? They're delayed, you know. How cross-border records go. We did it through a small chapel out of Las Cruces. Priest took sick. Everything's late." Lyle looked back and forth between them. "Suspicious. You always did have a soft spot for strays." Colt didn't flinch. "Better than being a wolf in a badge." Lyle smiled thinly. Then after a long pause, he turned. "Well, can't arrest a woman for being married. Not yet anyway." He nodded to his men. "Let's move out. Next ranch is 10 miles west." The door shut behind them with a final thud. Isabella collapsed onto the nearby chair the second they left. "When did you say that?" she whispered. "Why did you lie?" Colt walked to the kitchen, poured a bit of water into a tin cup, and handed it to her. "Because if I hadn't, they'd be dragging you behind a horse. Right now." She stared at him. "You didn't even hesitate." He shrugged. "I don't believe in hesitation. Not when it counts." She looked down at her hands, small, scraped, clinging to the cup. Colt walked to the drawer by the old writing desk, opened it slowly, and pulled something wrapped in cloth. A ring, silver, simple, worn from years on another hand. He knelt in front of her and gently lifted her left hand. "It's just for now," he said. "But I won't let anyone take you. Not again." He slid the ring onto her finger. Isabella's breath caught. She looked down at the ring, then at him. The firelight danced in her eyes, but this time no tears fell. Only something quieter, heavier. Gratitude, confusion, a thread of trust, still fragile, but no longer afraid. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds in thin strands, gold on the wet earth. But inside, it was something else that warmed the air. Not safety, not yet, but shelter. The moon hung low that night, veiled behind clouds, casting only a faint silver light over the land. The cabin was quiet, the kind of stillness that pressed against the chest. Colt had gone outside to check on the horses, but when he returned, he noticed the flicker of a candle through the cabin window. Inside, Isabella sat at the table, shoulders hunched, hair falling, forward as she wrote in something small and leather-bound. He paused at the doorway. "You're writing letters?" he asked, voice low. She flinched, then quickly closed the book and set it aside. "No," she said. Too fast. Colt raised a brow but didn't press. He moved to the stove, poured 2 cups of water, handed her one, then sat opposite her. The silence between them was familiar now, but tonight it felt different. He looked at the small book beside her hand. "You going to tell me what that is?" he asked gently. She stared at it, then picked it up slowly, running her thumb along the edge. After a long pause, she slid it across the table to him. Colt opened it. Names, 5 of them. Some he recognized, some he didn't. He looked back at her. They were there, she whispered, the night she died. Colt didn't speak. She went on, her voice a cracked river. The officer I killed was just one. The others, they stood by, laughed. Some held her down, others just watched. None stopped him, none answered for it. Colt's jaw clenched. She was everything to me, Isabella said. My sister, my only family, my reason. And they took her like she was nothing. Her fingers curled into fists on the table. So I'm going to find them one by one. If I have to die to make it happen, then so be it. Colt closed the book and slid it back toward her. Revenge don't bring peace, he said. I don't want peace, she snapped. I want justice. I want them to feel fear when they hear my name. I want them to look over their shoulder every damn night. He watched her for a moment, then said quietly, And if you kill them all, then what? You think you'll sleep better? She stared at him defiant, but something in her eyes cracked. No, she whispered, but maybe I won't see her face every time I close my eyes. She broke. Then the walls collapsed. Tears spilled. Not loud, not dramatic. Just steady, as if they'd been waiting behind her eyes for too long. Colt stood, walked past her without a word, and stepped outside onto the porch. The desert night was cold, sharp with silence. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands, the flare of the match briefly illuminating the hard lines of his face. He smoked slow, staring at the dark horizon. After a long while, he turned and stepped back into the cabin. Isabella hadn't moved. She sat there, staring down at the table, hands trembling. Colt walked up beside her, crouched slightly, and whispered, If you chase every shadow, you'll miss the sunrise. She looked at him, eyes red, voice trembling. Then tell me how to stop chasing. He didn't answer. He just placed a hand gently over hers. Not to silence her, not to claim her, just to remind her she was still here, still human, still worth saving. The morning was still, with a cold breeze rolling low across the prairie. Dew clung to the grass, glinting in the early light. Inside the cabin, Isabella stood by the hearth, her small satchel already packed. She hadn't said goodbye. She hadn't said anything at all. Colt leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her from across the room. He had known this moment would come. Known it from the night she handed him the list. Isabella's fingers tightened around the strap of her satchel. I have to do this, she said, voice flat. Colt didn't respond. I didn't ask you to save me, she added, more defensive now. You gave me shelter. I'm grateful. But I'm not yours to keep. Still. He said nothing. She moved toward the door. But before she could open it, he stepped forward. Not fast, not threatening, but deliberate. Come with me, he said simply. She blinked, caught off guard. Where? Just walk. He didn't wait for her answer, just turned and stepped out into the yard. She hesitated, then followed. They walked in silence, past the barn, past the corral, across the back field where the soil grew wildflowers in spring. The morning sun had not yet cleared the hills, and mist still clung to the dips in the land. Colt led her to the far edge of the property, where an old wooden gate stood between two cottonwoods. Beyond, a small family plot, just 3 gravestones, weather-worn, quiet. He opened the gate, stepped inside, and waited. Isabella followed slowly, her breath catching when she saw the largest stone. It was simple. Chiseled letters read, Maria Elena Mercer, beloved wife and dreamer, taken by dust, not forgotten. Colt knelt beside the grave. For a long while he said nothing, just ran his fingers over the edge of the stone, then he spoke, voice low. I used to carry a list, too. Isabella said nothing, only watched him. Names of the men who robbed that stagecoach. Ones who put bullets in Maria. Ones who left her bleeding on the road while they laughed. His hand curled into a fist on his knee. I tracked one all the way to Abilene, got within 10 feet of him in a saloon, had my gun drawn. He looked up at her then. But, I didn't shoot. Why? She whispered. He gestured to the grave. Because I realized I was about to kill a drunk who didn't remember her name, and even if I shot every last one of them, it wouldn't bring her back. It wouldn't give me peace. Just more ghosts. He stood slowly, brushing dust from his hands. This is where I buried that list, Isabella. This ground, this grave, is the only place that ever let me let go. She looked down at the stone, lips parted, eyes moist. Colt stepped to the side and knelt again. Among the grass, he carefully picked 3 small wildflowers, purple and white, growing near the marker. He stood and held them out to her. They grew here this spring, he said. She'd have liked that. Isabella hesitated, then took them gently from his hand. Her voice broke when she finally spoke. I don't know how to let it go. You don't have to yet, Colt said. Just don't let it bury you first. She closed her eyes, holding the flowers close, to her chest. I'm so tired of being angry, she whispered. I know, he said. That's how you know you're still human. A long silence followed. Then she looked at the grave one more time, then at Colt. I won't run today. He gave a small nod. That's enough for now. They stood there together between 2 graves, one in the earth, one in the heart. And for the first time, the wind didn't feel so cold. The clouds returned like old debts, thick and heavy over the hills. A storm was building again. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and something sharper. Danger. Colt had been mending a fence near the barn when he saw the rider coming down the trail, alone, steady, not a ranch hand, not a neighbor. Isabella watched from the porch, eyes narrowing the moment the man dismounted. He was tall, shoulders squared, a scar under his left eye like a jagged thread. His uniform jacket was open, revealing a pistol at his hip, and something darker in his gaze. Colt met him halfway, his boots crunching against dry dirt. You're a long way from your post, Colt said. The man didn't smile. Looking for someone, or maybe something, he said, gaze drifting toward the cabin. That right. Name's Vargas. You might have heard of me. Colt's face didn't move. I don't hear much out here. Isabella stepped off the porch. Vargas spotted her instantly. Well, I'll be damned, he said, a smirk curling his lips. Thought you were dead, sweetheart. Isabella froze. Don't call me that. Colt's voice was sharp, calm. She's not going anywhere. With you. Vargas chuckled, took a slow step forward. She's wanted for murder and desertion and crossing a federal line without permission. She's not wanted here, Colt replied. Vargas shrugged. That's not up to you. He reached for his pistol. Colt moved first. No shots fired. Not yet. But his rifle was up, steady. The barrel pointed straight at Vargas's chest. Vargas stopped. Put the gun down, Mercer, he warned. You're going to die for her. Colt's voice was like steel in the wind. I already did. That made Vargas pause. Colt didn't lower the rifle. He motioned to Isabella. Go now. She didn't hesitate. She turned and ran toward the barn. Vargas cursed and moved, but Colt stepped in his path, body blocking the way. Eyes locked. You'll have to go through me, Colt said. You think I won't? I think you'd better be sure. Vargas stared at him, jaw tight, fingers twitching near the grip of his pistol. Then he backed up one step. Coward, he spat. Colt didn't blink. Isabella had already reached the barn. Inside, the old boards creaked as she pulled back a loose plank Colt had shown her once weeks ago, when they were fixing the roof. Ain't much down there but dust and spiders, he'd said. Then now it was a hiding place. She slipped into the hole and dropped into the dark cellar beneath the barn floor. Moments later, Colt was behind her, pulling the trapdoor shut. The air was thick with damp earth and old wood. The faint sound of boots echoed above as Vargas circled outside. In the dark, Colt found her hand. She was trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This is my fault." "No," Colt said, his grip firm. This was always coming. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then harder. Thunder rumbled in the distance. In the shadows, Colt turned to her. "There's no death more worth it," he said quietly. Then, "The kind that comes from protecting someone you love." She looked at him, stunned. "You mean that?" "I never say what I don't mean." She reached for his hand, gripped it tighter. Above them, Vargas shouted threats into the rain. But down here, it was only them, the hunted and the one who refused to let her go, and for the first time, Isabella wasn't thinking about running. She was thinking about staying. The rain lasted through the night, washing away the dust and bloodstains from the earth. By morning, Vargas was gone. They found him camped just outside the northern ridge, boots soaked, pistol wet, frustration boiling in his veins, but he hadn't found her. He hadn't even come close. Colt rode into town the next day. He didn't wear a gun on his hip, just his old coat, and a folder of statements tucked under one arm. He sat in front of the sheriff, laid out what happened: the crossing, the abuse, the officer, the death. She didn't run from guilt, Colt said. She ran from men who thought her life wasn't worth the dirt they buried her sister in. The sheriff, a quiet man named Hank Greaves, had listened without interrupting. Then he nodded once. "I've heard enough stories like that to know truth when I see it. It wasn't easy. There were meetings, testimonies, heated words behind closed doors. Some townsfolk demanded her arrest, called her a criminal, said Colt had lost his mind. Others, quieter voices, remembered the way Maria Mercer had sung in church, and how Colt had once carried a boy 7 miles on foot after a horse threw him. Those voices didn't shout, but they stayed. In the end, the charges were dropped. No trial, no bounty. Just a letter signed and stamped, saying what happened was self-defense, that the case was closed. Vargas was reassigned to a station out near Yuma. Hot, isolated, and far, away from anything worth hurting. When Colt returned home, Isabella was sitting on the porch, the leather-bound notebook in her hands. He stepped off his horse slowly, tied it to the post, and sat beside her without a word. She didn't look up. "I thought I'd feel different," she said. "But I don't. I still wake up reaching for her." He nodded. "You might always." She held up the notebook. It shook slightly in her grasp. "Kept these names like they were sacred, like they were all I had left of her." She opened it one last time. The names stared back. Black ink, angry strokes, years of pain compressed into 5 lines. Then she stood, walked into the yard. Colt followed, slow and steady. She crouched beside the fire pit, pulled a match from her pocket, and struck it. The flame caught quickly. She looked at the list, at the pages that had become her Bible of rage, then dropped the book into the fire. The pages curled, blackened, turned to ash. Colt stood behind her, watching the flames rise. He didn't speak. He stepped forward quietly, placed a hand on her shoulder, and gave it the faintest squeeze. Not to stop her, not to comfort her, but to say he was still there. When the last page crumbled into glowing dust, he reached out and gently brushed the smear of ash from her cheek with the back of his knuckle. Her eyes closed. She didn't cry. She just let the silence settle. Later, as they sat back on the porch, dusk creeping in and the sky blooming violet above them, Isabella whispered, Thank you for staying when I had nothing left but fire. Colt didn't answer right away. He looked out at the horizon, then back at her. You were never fire, Isabella. You were the spark that survived it. She looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, she didn't see a rancher or a savior. She saw a man who had buried his own storm and still chose to stand beside hers. 1 year later, the wind was gentler. It whispered through tall pines, carried the scent of pine sap and warm earth instead of gunpowder and blood. The highlands had their own rhythm, slower, quieter. Time moved like smoke through the trees, lingering long enough to be felt, but never quite caught. The land up here didn't care who you were, only how you treated it. A small cabin stood near the edge of a wide meadow, tucked between two sloping hills. Smoke curled from the chimney like a ribbon, lazily dancing into the sky. Tomatoes ripened along a wooden trellis outside the kitchen window. Chickens clucked softly. In a hand-built coop, a horse grazed in the shade of an old oak tree, tail swishing against the quiet. Inside, the world was even softer. Isabella sat by the window, her elbows resting on the worn sill, a leather-bound journal open before her. Not the old one, not the book of names or shadows of rage. This one was soft green with edges curled from use. It smelled of ink and lavender. Beside the journal lay a half-written letter, folded once. The envelope bore the careful handwriting of someone who'd learned patience the hard way. It was addressed to the orphans in Juarez, children her sister had once protected, and whom Isabella now supported with small gifts, dried herbs, and stories from the mountains. She dipped her pen again, paused as the ink soaked the nib, and wrote slowly in Spanish. If they had caught me, they'd have hanged me twice. But love caught me first, and it didn't kill me. It saved me. She stared at the words for a long moment, the way they looked on paper, the weight of them. Then she smiled. Not the smile of a girl who had survived, but of a woman who had finally begun to live. The door creaked softly behind her. Colt stepped inside, boots dusted from the trail, the scent of cedar and smoke following. Him in. He held 2 mugs, steam rising in gentle spirals. One carried black coffee, strong as the land that raised him. The other, peppermint tea, steeped just the way she liked. He set the tea in front of her and sat without a word. They didn't need many words anymore. He glanced at the journal. No more lists, he asked, lips curling at the corner. She looked down, then back up with a gentle grin. No more lists. He took a sip of coffee, leaned back in the chair that had become his favorite. Creaky, carved by hand. Good, he said. Only one thing left on mine. She raised an eyebrow. And what's that? He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small wooden box, and placed it on the table. She stared at it, hesitant, then opened it. Inside was a ring, simple silver. Silver uneven, but polished with care. She lifted it between 2 fingers. It's beautiful, she said softly. Made it from fence wire, he replied. The part that used to mark the edge of the ranch. Figured we don't need boundaries anymore. Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away. No more borders, she whispered. No more running. She looked at him for a long moment, then slid the new ring onto her finger beside the old one, the one that once belonged to Maria. The two glinted together in the afternoon, light, not as replacements, but as roots intertwined. She traced them both with a fingertip. 2 lives, she said. 1 path. He nodded once, the weight in his chest lighter than it had been in years. They sat there for a while, bathed in the amber hush of the setting sun. The light spilled through the window in long gold ribbons. Outside, a deer moved gracefully through. the tall grass. Birds fluttered toward the trees. Somewhere a hawk cried, not in warning, but in song. Inside the cabin, there was no threat, no running, no vengeance, just warmth and the quiet knowledge that not all wounds vanish, but some with time and love simply stop bleeding, and that some people are not saved by mercy or law, but by something far gentler. Mention something like love. Some stories don't end with a gunshot. They end with a quiet morning, a silver ring, and the kind of love that outlives fear. Colt and Isabella taught us that healing doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from holding on even when the world tells you to let go. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in second chances and the power of love beyond borders. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories, where every tale rides through dust, danger, and devotion, and reminds us that even in the wildest places, hearts can still find home. Hit that bell, leave a comment, and join us for the next ride into love, loss, and legacy straight from the heart of the frontier.